Hey guys, welcome back to Redline Ranch. This is my 1997 Toyota 4Runner, and today we're fixing the transfer case. I previously bought this thing with a bad engine and with intentions to get it back on the road as a reliable daily driver, and that's just exactly what I did. There's a video down below in the description that goes over that entire process from buying it all the way to getting it back on the road. But today, we're going to be fixing the transfer case. What's wrong with the transfer case? Well, our transfer case has a pretty severe leak. Four-wheel drive works, two-wheel drive works, no issues there, but the previous owner had rebuilt and resealed the transfer case, and as it turns out, they didn't do a very good job. Since I already have a good-to-go unit that's sealed up and doesn't have any leaks, I'm just going to be doing an R&R, remove and replace. We're going to be putting this thing up on jack stands, pulling the transfer case out of it, and putting a good unit in without doing any internal work to the transfer case itself today. First thing we got to do is we're going to get this thing in the air, throw some jack stands under it. Now that we got the 4Runner in the air and I've got some good work clothes on, we can dive into why this transfer case needs removed in the first place, what issues I'm having, and why I can't just fix it while it's in the car. Jumping under the car, you can see this transfer case has been leaking pretty bad. And it's not leaking from the output shaft or this output shaft flange that I could reseal. And it's not leaking from this output shaft as it's dry right around the output shaft. Unfortunately, the transfer case not leaking from either output shaft is leaking from either the input shaft or a different seal in the front where it mates to the transmission. So we have gear oil that is seeping out of this seam, dripping here and going and making a huge mess down the entire transfer case. And the reason I am just replacing this transfer case, the benefits of doing that as opposed to fixing this one is, for starters, it's going to be quicker for me to just remove this and replace it with a good unit because I can do all of that pretty quick. I don't have to tear into this, and if something does go wrong when I'm trying to repair this, I'm not going to be keeping this 4Runner out of commission. First thing we want to do is pull the front and rear drive shafts out of this thing. For that, you'll need some 14mm wrenches. We got the front and rear drive shafts removed. With the front and rear drive shafts out, we can go ahead and we can pull this wiring harness off and get everything disconnected. The wires that are here are a speed sensor wire, there's some O2 sensor wiring also in with this wiring, and there's a four-wheel drive indicator sensor. So we just got to get those few things pulled off and the transfer case will be unwired. And drive shafts disconnected, wiring disconnected. Next thing we need to move on to is getting this shifter up top disconnected. First thing you want to do is take these shifter knobs off. They might take a little bit of force to break free. They might take a little bit of time to get off, but they unscrew. It's pretty simple. Then this trim just pops up, and that exposes these rubber boots, and these rubber boots are held in with 4 10mm bolts. Remove these 4 bolts. After you remove those 4 bolts, this whole rubber boot assembly should pop up. Takes a little bit of finagling. It should slide right over both shifters like that. That'll expose the top of the transmission and transfer case, and from here it is 4 12mm bolts to pull the transfer case shifter off of the transfer case, which will allow us to slide the transfer case backwards off of the transmission and let us take it off of the car. When you pull the shifter off, you're going to want to make sure you make a note of where the shifter is. I left it in two-wheel drive, which is pretty well straight up and down, and when you pull it out, you're going to want to make sure you put it in the specific spot you pulled it out of. Now that we have got everything disconnected from the transfer case, we've got the shifter removed, the front and rear drive shafts, and the wiring, we can go ahead and move on to getting the transfer case unbolted from the transmission. There are a bunch of 12mm bolts on there, and they're usually pretty darn easy to access. All right, got all the bolts removed that hold the transmission and transfer case together. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna manhandle this thing out of here. I would advise using a transmission jack or having a buddy help you, but this isn't my first rodeo, so I'm gonna do it myself. Oh, lovely. Woohoo! Okay. Well, that is why I'm replacing this transfer case. I don't know why the T case spit its guts into the abyss, but dude that I bought this from said he replaced the transfer case. And I find that hard to believe. Wow. And with that giant mess we made, we got the transfer case out. Gear oil is not easy to clean up, and there was like almost a gallon of it on the ground, it seemed like. And the issue with this transfer case is that front seal isn't touching the front shaft all the way around. This front seal is wrong. So I think what happened is the previous owner that had rebuilt and resealed the transfer case on this thing did a very bad job at checking the parts they were putting in this thing, and they put a transfer case seal from a different transfer case onto this, causing all of the fluid to go into the union space between the transmission and transfer case and letting it leak out because there's not supposed to be fluid there. It's supposed to be a dry connection. This is what it's supposed to look like. There's not supposed to be any sort of fluids whatsoever in there, and this is the transfer case we're actually putting in it. This is also going to give you a better idea of where all of the bolts are that hold the transmission and transfer case together. There's one on either side of the shifter up top, two on either side going down, and then two on the bottom that are a little bit staggered. With that, I'm going to finish cleaning up that giant mess that is under the 4runner, and I'm going to go ahead and start putting this new transfer case in. Should be as easy as that, and we'll be back on the road in no time. Installation is just reversal of the removal. So we're going to start by sliding this thing under the input shaft. It's going to slide on. There are a couple dowel pins that'll hold it in place, and then we can put the 8 12mm bolts that hold the transfer case to the transmission in and get those all tightened and torqued down. I want to be careful going and stabbing it because there is a seal in there that you're putting it in. You don't want to be putting too much stress on that. But, like I said, those dowels will line it right on up. And we can start going back in with all of the 12mm bolts. 2 on this side, 2 on the driver's side, 2 on the bottom, 2 on top. Now that we got the transfer case completely bolted in, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do reversal removal. We're going to get this wiring and we're going to get these drive shafts hooked up. We got everything down below wrapped up. We got both the drive shafts in. We got all the wiring wrapped up. We had all of the bolts tight. We made sure everything was ready to go. We made sure that the transfer case was full of fluid. We made sure that the transmission was full of fluid. Now we can jump into the cab and get everything wrapped up in here. So I went ahead and I covered this up just to prevent anything from falling in while I was trying to get everything situated. OEM gasket. Now I can make sure everything is cleaned off and good to go on the shifter. Get everything lined up with the shifter in there. I believe that it is where it needs to be. This shifter actually has the rubber boot that goes over the ball, which is nice. The transmission that came in this thing didn't have that. After you get all 4 of those bolts tight, oh, see, I messed up. You want to make sure you can shift it. And this won't shift. So I got to take it off and try again. Look at that. And we got all the gears, 2, 4, neutral, low. And all I got left is there's a breather hose right here that is now hooked up. And I got to get these rubber boots on and I can get this trim on. Well, there we go. And we've got both shifters in. They both still feel good. So I can go ahead and I can put the trim on with the bezel. Goes right on over and snaps into place. And finishing touches, we got our shifters. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those things I'm going to get instant gratification from doing anything. 4-wheel drive worked before. It's going to work again. I drove the vehicle this transfer case came out of. I know it worked fine. The gratification is going to come from not leaving a puddle of oil everywhere, not constantly having to refill the transfer case with fluid. So super stoked about that. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. I will catch you next time.